Amen.
Good evening. We are delighted and honoured to welcome the Reverend Dr. Inderjit Bhogal to deliver our keynote speech. Inderjit is a leading theologian and Methodist minister. Retiring in 2018, Inderjit is currently working with Churches Together in Britain and Ireland to develop and promote the idea of church sanctuary, and has been the minister of Winnocott Chapel since 1994. Inderjit is founder and president of City of Sanctuary, a former president of the Methodist Conference, former leader and CEO of the Coromila community, and former CEO of Yorkshire and Humber Faiths Forum. Inderjit is also president of the Methodist Peace Fellowship. The title of this evening's address is Church of Sanctuary, Churches Engaging with Refugees. I invite Inderjit to the stage. Thank you.
I have to write everything down. It stops me waffling on and not knowing when to stop. And you'll be glad about that. So I greet you all in the name of Christ and wish upon you the peace and blessings of God. It is a real honor to share with you all. What a fantastic location this is, Simon, with wonderful inclusive values. I love what you said there about eco-church, inclusive church, home for dignity, and good stuff. Well done. And thank you, Gillian, there, for liaising with me in relation to the event. Many emails to and fro between us. Thank you. And I want to begin by saying thank you to you, the Church's Refugee Fund in London, and supporters for your contributions and for your commitment to achieving justice for refugees. The London Church's Refugee Fund, Christian Aid, CAFOD, Tear Fund, organisations like that, you do well to honour, treasure and value Christian congregations, followers of Christ, who bring great passion and generosity for your work. Sometimes when I've given a talk like this, people will say to me, I gave a talk somewhere and I was helping in the kitchen afterwards to do the washing up, and there were two women that gave me a tea towel and they said, you do the drying up. So I said, okay. And while I was doing that, one of them said, Inderjit, I've got to summarize what you've said in our church newsletters. How am I going to do that? And before I could reply, the other woman said, just write Inderjit dried up. So, if you want a summary of what I want to say to you, it's a one-word summary, sanctuary. If you forget everything else, I'm going to say to you, remember sanctuary, that will bring back other bits. So high fives, just greet each other around you. Give yourselves a high five. High five. Great. Give me a chance to... Okay. So, Simon, if I said to you, let's do a high fives up here. If you're just going to stand there and do that with that hand. Okay, like that. And this one like that. What shape does that form? Bridge, roof, church roof, archway. Okay, thank you very much. It's the logo of City of Sanctuary. The shape is like a roof or a simple shelter. It's also like a nativity, isn't it? You can imagine a crib right there at the base, shelter. Sanctuary is about finding shelter in each other, building sanctuary in community, in congregation, giving shelter to each other. And this is sanctuary that churches build. The next slide is a wonderful Celtic proverb I came across in Belfast. I won't attempt to say it in the Irish language, but it is in the shelter of each other that the people shall live. I'm wearing this rope as a stole. I picked up this rope from a broken refugee boat that came to grief off the coast of Lampedusa Island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Most of those on board drowned. If this rope could speak, what stories would it tell of the people who were on board? From the same boat, I took this sock. It's quite a large sock. You know, what size is that? It says on it, sport. Whose sock is that? Obviously, someone with sporty ambitions, but where is the owner of that sock? And if this sock could speak, what stories would it tell of its owner? And I broke off a piece of wood from the boat and made a cross from it. It's a charred piece of wood, if you can see. It's burnt. The boat had caught fire. So what stories would this cross, this wood, tell us, if it could speak? I could say a lot more, but a stole represents the cross of Christ that we carry, and this rope will be my stole as long as people seeking sanctuary continue to die in the waters. Last year, over 3,000 people died in the Mediterranean. As of May this year, 880 people have drowned in the Mediterranean. Between 2014 and 2018, it is recorded that around 12,000 people who drowned were never found. The sea is a mass grave. When will this outrage end? On Saturday, this coming Saturday, there's a big conference, a Church of Sanctuary conference, to be held in Birmingham, aimed at resourcing and supporting congregations in sanctuary work, to build networks, to engage with the issues that are before us. Churches have some important work to do. It should be no surprise to anyone that churches are showing a strategic alternative to stop the boats. The government's hostile environment includes anti-refugee rhetoric, stopping small refugee boats crossing the English Channel, and the threat to detain and deport and send illegal immigrants to Rwanda. Boats, you know, are not only prominent in politics, they are a metaphor of church and life also, as we can see from this logo here of Churches Together in England. The church afloat on the ocean of the world with a mast in the form of a cross, symbolizing faith and unity. Ecclesial architecture, not so much this particular building, often reflect boats, recalling the rescue mission symbolized in Noah's Ark, and Paul's sailing missions and shipwrecks, and the place of boats in Jesus' ministry. In many churches, if you look at them, the boats resemble, the roofs resemble boats, don't they? And sometimes the wooden arches under those roofs are like the ribs of a boat's hull. It may feel like you're sitting underneath an overturned boat. Congregations sit in an area which is called the nave, a word derived from the Latin navis, which means ship, and which gives us the word navigation. Sometimes, certainly in Celtic spirituality, Christian pilgrimage is portrayed as a boat journey to the shores of heaven. This is imagery that provokes and repays reflection and response. We cannot ignore those in danger on the sea. So where are we now as churches in the world, and what message is it that we speak into the world? In an increasingly polarized world, blighted with hatred and hostility, we hold a vision, a world defined by hospitality and sanctuary for all. So I'm currently working with churches together in Britain and Ireland to develop and promote the idea of church of sanctuary. My appeal to churches is become churches of sanctuary and support your nearest city of sanctuary group in their work. I've written about this in a little book called Hospitality and Sanctuary for All. I'll say a bit more about this in a minute. And you can get copies of that book. I'm afraid I've sold out and I have none with me, but more will be published. You can get them from Churches Together in Britain and Ireland by going to their website. It's not for sale. Make a donation. You can have a copy. But I invite you, on behalf of CTBI, to promote the development of the Church of Sanctuary movement. Congregations working together around the idea of hospitality and sanctuary for all is what is envisaged. A movement is built on the strength of shared enterprise, working together around a common cause and idea. And the lead is taken by people at the local grassroots level who act for social change, and that's you and me. So we can imagine a Church of Sanctuary movement around many local members and congregations who want to extend and express hospitality to people suffering the vileness of hatred and hostility. Alongside the Church of Sanctuary, CTBI has worked with the Refugee Council and City of Sanctuary to establish an annual Sanctuary Sunday, which is the Sunday at the end of Refugee Week. So 23rd of June this year, put that in your diary, mark it in your church, use the occasion to launch your Church of Sanctuary initiative and hold a collection for the London Church's Refugee Fund. And Sanctuary Sunday is an annual moment to call us back and to recommit ourselves to ensure that our work with refugees is rooted in our worship and prayer and engages the whole of our congregation. So, just to go to that hospitality and sanctuary resource for all, which I mentioned earlier, which offers prompts for conversation and reflection on the theme of hospitality and sanctuary. Though people of different background and beliefs are involved in the work of hospitality and sanctuary, this book here is a resource particularly produced for churches. And it is supported by Churches Together in Britain and Ireland and invites you to worship and pray and to reflect theologically, biblically around the themes of hospitality and sanctuary. There are 5 sections in the book, and each section focuses on the biblical foundations of sanctuary and includes ideas for group work and personal reflection and what it means to be a church of sanctuary. So, section 1 explores the idea of God taking sanctuary amongst us. Who's the first person who takes sanctuary biblically? It's God. Exodus 25 verse 8, we read that the migrant God says to Moses, "Have the people make me a sanctuary so that I may dwell amongst them." It's that very concept we see in the New Testament where we read in John chapter 1 and verse 14, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That word dwelt among us, pitched a tent among us, in Greek is the same word that you find in Exodus 25:8, skynos, sanctuary. So what do we take from the idea that God takes sanctuary amongst us? And where do we encounter this God? That's section 1. Section 2 then calls for hospitality to the stranger and considers biblical and also some interfaith perspectives, because all faiths value the concept of hospitality. And we reflect here on stories where people have found that they encounter and entertain angels when they build hospitality with the stranger. As in the story of Abraham and Sarah sitting outside their tent, 3 strangers passing by. Don't go past without having some bread with us. And they find that they are entertaining angels. And the grief-stricken disciples of Jesus meeting him as a stranger on the road to Emmaus, recognizing his face in the breaking and sharing of bread. So what's your experience of sharing hospitality and finding yourself in the company of angels? The Indian concept of hospitality is that treat those who are your visitors as if they were divine. Section 3 introduces discussions around the theme of gift and redemption, the story of Jesus' arrest and passion and crucifixion. Hold hope in the midst of hurt. In his crucifixion, people see how God is present in the heart of human agonies, giving meaning and hope in their most awful experiences, like wrongful persecution and false witness spoken against them. So in what ways is your community, your congregation, enriched and blessed by those who come to be amongst you as strangers, pilgrims along the way? And section 4 introduces the idea of city of sanctuary and building cultures of welcome and hospitality, rooted in the biblical stories of cities of refuge found in the book of Numbers and Joshua, and the repeated command to love the stranger. Only once in Hebrew scriptures do we read, love your neighbor as yourself, but nearly 40 times in different ways we are called to also love the stranger. And so there is a brief look at what it means to be a sanctuary to yourself and to others. And there's the challenge to engage with the city and the Church of Sanctuary movement. And then at the end, section 5 offers ideas for worship and prayer. And the act of worship given there can be used to conclude your studies and work, and could be used as a resource for Sanctuary Sunday and the established Racial Justice Sunday. So the resource concludes then with reflections on what a church of sanctuary is, with local stories and experience. So make your place of worship a sanctuary where all are treated with welcome, generous hospitality and protection from harm. For me, a good Christian symbol of this is Holy Communion, a revelation of the world as it's meant to be, as well as a foretaste of the heavenly banquet, where all are welcome and valued equally, and where no one is excluded or made to feel like an outsider, a sign of the kingdom of God. So what's this Church of Sanctuary idea all about? So we're not talking about a novel, unimagined new idea, but one that has a long history in these islands. The concept of sanctuary is rooted in the Bible, as I've said. The aim in Church of Sanctuary is to take steps to build protective hospitality in ways that are mutually enriching. The hope is that churches will become places for all and proud to foster welcome, hospitality and safety for people fleeing violence and persecution as a clear demonstration of Christian discipleship. The association of sanctuary and holiness is universally recognized. Hospitality is holiness in action. Sanctuary is an expression of hospitality as a clear challenge to hostility. And as I have stressed, sanctuary or hospitality with safety is a long-standing prophetic theme in Scripture. And sanctuary, the call to sanctuary, is the most repeated ethical requirement in the Hebrew Scriptures, and it is echoed in Jesus' teaching about how we treat the neighbor and the outsider. If you want to see me and serve me, he said, in as much as you do it to those considered to be the least important, you do it to me. So sanctuary in churches used to assist those claiming to be innocent of crime. More recently, it has been used to protect people from deportation, unjust deportation. And now we need sanctuary churches who greet people fleeing from danger for their lives. And we need sanctuary for all vulnerable people. So, who are the people who are lacking financial, communal, emotional, and other support and feel isolated? The priority for providing safety for older people, and children is increasingly recognized. The challenge to provide safety for refugees and all those seeking sanctuary must receive greater attention. So, of course, all churches take pride in being welcoming. Many churches, I'm sure yours is, are thoroughly engaged with welcoming and supporting refugees and people seeking sanctuary. I'm thankful for the Welcome Church development. So what's added by becoming a recognized church of sanctuary? I would say it further strengthens and embeds your ethos and culture of welcome and hospitality. It roots your work in ancient biblical wisdom. It connects your church to the Church of Sanctuary network and the wider City of Sanctuary network, and it takes you on a journey to build collaboration, to know that you're part of a movement endorsed by a diverse range of people. And you become a part of a movement to build cultures of welcome and hospitality. You engage in more informed ways with serious issues that matter to you, and you connect refugees and people seeking sanctuary to support networks and criteria. So if you could have the next slide. In the Church of Sanctuary, all members of the congregation intentionally work together around 3 simple criteria. So you commit yourself to learning about and listening to real life stories of refugees and people seeking sanctuary, and engage with others to make sure that you are working from facts and not fiction. Secondly, you work as hard as you can to embed the values and cultures of welcome, hospitality and safety as part of the values of your congregation and community, and use these to support refugees and people seeking sanctuary and include them in your activity. And thirdly, be loud and proud about this. Share your vision with pride with others and the commitment and achievements with others, and let others know about the positive contribution of refugees to society and the benefits of welcoming together. And all members work together. Don't leave it to 1 or 2 people who have a bit of a passion for this work. It's about all of us engaging together. It's not a political campaign or movement, but it does inform our political engagement and helps to equip congregations to speak out and to speak up for justice. It's a biblically inspired initiative. It is about being prophetic, challenging hostility with hospitality. And if it means we become a bit political, well, this is in keeping with the style of the biblical prophets who were always speaking truth to power with passion and compassion. Learning and working together to grow cultures of welcome and hospitality is a rewarding piece of work. You can apply to have a Church of Sanctuary certificate, and that helps others to see your values of welcome and hospitality. So I want to put all this into the context of the City of Sanctuary movement, which itself is a movement within another movement, working with people seeking sanctuary. So City of Sanctuary was founded in 2005. On the 18th of June, World Refugee Day 2007, Sheffield became UK's first city of sanctuary. There are now over 100 towns, cities, boroughs, villages, places of sanctuary, working with the vision to build cultures of welcome and hospitality. And the vision has been taken up by universities. 2/3 of our universities are universities of sanctuary. There are hundreds of schools of sanctuary. There are theatres, libraries, gardens, and so on. So what about churches of sanctuary is what I say. So the origins of City of Sanctuary are modest. Began in my work as a Methodist minister in Sheffield, where I've been associated with key organisations, religious and secular, working with refugees in the city. In October 2005, with my Quaker colleague, Craig Barnett, we convened a meeting which led to the launch of the City of Sanctuary. The meeting was attended about 40 people from different organisations working with refugees. They were invited to tell their story. We all applauded their work, and then we all agreed that if we worked together and collaborated and shared our wisdom, we could have a bigger impact in our city and work towards building a culture of welcome, hospitality and safety, especially for asylum seekers and refugees. We also agreed that if all of us went and got others to engage with this, if you could get about 100 organisations in our city, we could then go to our local authority and say, look, that's the kind of city we want to live in. You're our elected representatives. How are you going to help us? If they say, we'll help you, we'll become a City of Sanctuary. And I thought this would take about 10 years, so by 2015, Sheffield would be a City of Sanctuary. But in 2 years only, Sheffield was declared UK's first City of Sanctuary. What that meant was that the City Council had passed a resolution to support the many local groups who had signed a pledge to work together to really make a difference in our city. So, my friends, to move on a bit, where does my passion for this work come from? My own parents left Punjab. Okay, elections going on in India at the moment, some interesting things emerging from there. My parents left Punjab as young teenagers soon after independence and partition in 1947. A situation that led to one of the biggest movements of people across borders in human history. A movement that sadly witnessed much violence and bloodshed. They, as young teenagers, right on the border, will have witnessed atrocity. My mum, as a young teenager, will have seen young girls being raped, abducted, killed. They will have been traumatized by it, and their parents will have said to them, go somewhere else. And they went to Kenya. I was born in Nairobi, where I lived till I was 11. And then Kenya became independent British politics has a lot to do with the movement of my family around the world. And Kenya achieved independence, and with my parents and family, I left for Britain via a 9-month sojourn around Tanzania, or Tanganyika as it was. By the time they were 30, my parents had to move twice as a result of political decisions of nations. And my first home in this country was in Dudley in the West Midlands. My real claim to fame is I went to school with Lenny Henry. We went to the same school together. Both of us left without any qualifications because our teachers didn't think we were up to much, but we both made a bit of a contribution. From my earliest days of life in UK, from the age of 11, people of Asian backgrounds came to me because I could speak English to fill in their forms, to deal with their immigration papers. And from then, from the age of 11, I've been involved in this work, and I've become aware personally, more than professionally, become familiar with immigration matters and policies and procedures, and I've been determined to take simple steps to seek justice, mercy and humility in policy and procedure. My theological reflections, my theology is rooted in my experience of immigration. The language I use has arisen from my faith, including stories recorded in Scripture. Words like walking, wilderness, exile, refuge, refugee, sanctuary, prayer. These are deeply spiritual terms and full of meaning. As a Methodist minister and pastor, I've worked with others to challenge injustice in policy, and I have supported campaigns to challenge unjust deportations. In the 1980s, I supported people taking sanctuary in churches through British Council of Churches. Geoffrey Roper, you remember all that? It's so good to see you sitting there. In 1997, March 1997, I walked from Sheffield to number 10 Downing Street with a letter to the Prime Minister asking that asylum seekers who are not criminals are not detained in conventional prisons alongside convicted prisons. And as president of the British Methodist Conference, I visited every detention centre in Britain and Ireland, and then I wrote a report which is listed there, Unlocking the Doors. I wrote this for the Home Secretary, Jack Straw, at the time, so to say, this is what I saw, what you're going to do. And then in 2005, we had that meeting in Sheffield, and then Sheffield became a city of sanctuary. So my question is, no, so I haven't come into working with refugees lately, in 2015. No, it's been in my bones and blood and being. My question, my passion is, what about churches of sanctuary? So look at these figures here. According to United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, there are over 100 million people who have fled their homes because of danger to their lives, many separated from families and friends in the process. 90% of the world's refugees are from countries in or close to conflict. Around 70% of them are trapped inside their own countries. And around 90% of those who manage to get out just go to the next country. And smaller numbers who manage to escape and go in search for safety further face horrendous hardships, dangers and obstacles, crossing wildernesses of deserts, treacherous sea waters, unscrupulous smugglers, watertight borders and horrific sufferings. And those who manage to cross deserts, the Mediterranean Sea, many borders, then the English Channel, face what the government has called a hostile environment, detention and deportation. We'll send you to Rwanda. The message is, you're not welcome here. Deterring people whose lives are in danger isn't going to stop people coming here for sanctuary. If 90% of the world's refugees are people from countries in or close to conflict, I'll tell you how to stop the boats. Stop the wars. The solution lies in eradicating war, ending poverty, tackling global warming, being at ease with those who are different. More immediately, people coming here seeking sanctuary require hospitality, not hostility. That's the context in which we do our work of challenging hostility with hospitality by building cultures of welcome and hospitality and sanctuary. Roman Catholic theologian Gemma Tullard from the Philippines makes a very strong, coherent, cohesive, and compassionate case for theological reflection on migration, exploring the positive dimensions of migration and migrants. Working from a theology of one bread, one body, one people, she argues for social justice in immigration. Well, what would social justice in immigration look like? Let me very briefly tell you what I have to say, because the government have been talking about, and all the politicians today, about immigration. There is an urgent need for global cooperation to manage the global movement of people and immigration in the broadest sense of its meaning. Britain needs migrants. Don't start immigration policies by talking about caps and limits. Talk about the need for migrants and the skills they bring. Stopping migration is like stopping glaciers melting in global warming. So what minimally justice in immigration means is we need process to manage, not prevent immigration. We need to distinguish between people who travel on work, student, and holiday visas and those who apply for refugee status and those who come here as refugees. We need a broader definition of who is a refugee today. We need to create safe passages for people seeking sanctuary and refugees, not reducing them or shutting them. We need to support search and rescue of those in danger. We need care and speed in asylum decisions, and we need to end detention of already hurting people. We need to establish the right for asylum seekers to work. We need to build cultures of welcome and hospitality and sanctuary. We need to invest in instruments of peace, not war, healing, not hurting. It is possible to protect borders and provide reformed immigration and asylum policies that are based on justice and mercy and humility. Resettlement schemes can be expanded and enhanced with quality inclusion and integration support of refugees and people seeking sanctuary. As a member of the United Nations and a signatory of the United Nations Refugee Convention, the UK should share the responsibility for the protection of refugees globally. Okay, I've run out of time. Before I'm told to shut up, let me draw to a close. The poet laureate, Andrew Motion, if you come to Sheffield, you see his words, if you got good sight, on a building in front of you, a Sheffield Hallam University building, and the words read, "O traveller from somewhere to here, to wander through the labyrinth of air, pause here now, and let the sight of this sheer cliff become a priming place which lift you to speculate. What if, what if, what if? What if we could all work together to bring our diverse populations into shared conversation on how we can work together to build better understanding, deeper relationships of mutual respect and trust, and come to genuinely accept each other as human beings?" Well, my 3 answers to the 3 what-ifs in my next slide. Be human and call others back to their humanity. All people are made in the image of God. Be hospitable and call others to express hospitality. This is a biblical mandate. Always challenge hostility, and this is done when you challenge inhumanity and in hospitality, and Jesus models this well. So be hospitable, be human, be hospitable, challenge hostility, and I believe every human being is capable of doing this, and because of that, I believe this is a strong basis for building hope, and the resurrection of Christ will not let us rest for anything less. Always remain hopeful and build hope. My friends, the way ahead is to widen and deepen relationships across different cultures and creeds and colors and identities, to end hatred and to build cultures where all are welcome and valued and belong equally together and have sanctuary. All people are human beings with names and stories and deep relationships. Everyone wants empathy more than sympathy, respect more than pity. We have fantastic opportunities in our multi-ethnic and plural societies to meet and engage with each other. We belong to each other, and we all want the best for ourselves. We can work together to ensure the best for everyone. So, how we relate to each other, and in particular to those who are seeking sanctuary and safety, will be central to humanity. How we treat those who are in the greatest need of safety will be the measure by which we shall judge personal, national, and international morality and spirituality. You, my friends, will not be founding by that measure because of all you are and all you do. I can see from your work what amazing people you are. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for your passion and for your commitment. I assure you of my love and prayerful solidarity and all the strength of God to you. Thank you, and bless you. Yes.
Thank you so much, Inderjit, for your thoughtful and challenging presentation. We do actually have opportunity for some questions, which I'm sure there will be many. We've got a couple of microphones. Who's got the microphones? Anyone got the microphones? Simon, have you got them? They're at the back.
You've got people to run them. Are there people who are primed to
Matthew,
be runners?
we'll take one.
Somebody on this side? One of the trustees.
And if you'd like to ask a question, if you could put your hand up so we can get a microphone to you. Are there any questions to Inderjit? Chris.
Dr. Bhogal, thank you so much. Can I begin by throwing in a grenade? Is that all right?
No, it's not all right. No grenades allowed.
I think I operate out of fear on the Enneagram, which means that I'm a devil's advocate at any meeting, and providing people are strong enough to cope with that, it's fine. So, I don't know how often a new city of refugees arrive in the UK, let's say the size of Exeter or Birmingham or so on, and that is one of the cudgels with which we get beaten.
Yeah.
That when will it end?
Yeah.
You know, the next city has to be built,
Yeah.
etc., etc. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know that is what people lob at you, isn't it? You know, there are, in terms of immigration, around 700,000 people net migration last year. The majority of them were students and people on work visa, quite legitimately here. And also it includes people coming from Hong Kong and Ukraine. Those who are coming here through other routes because they can't come here safely and legitimately, it's a tiny proportion. But the main item of the news is about that tiny proportion, you know. So I think what I was saying, number one, in terms of the 3 criteria for being a church, is saying, number one, learn the facts, you know, because a lot of opinion is formed on the basis of fiction and mythology and, you know, reading the figures incorrectly. So I think the first thing we can all do is to get to know the facts. And there are people sitting here, I mean, you know, who would endorse that, who know all about that. I don't need to labour it, but really that's the way to deal with that. So we need to wise up and, you know, be informed. Yeah, it's a very important point you make. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I've got one. General election is now only a month away. Immigration and migration are already being so prominent in the election campaign. If you had an opportunity to sit down with Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, what would you say to them?
Well, I did that in my presentation. So I did a kind of
a minute to speak with them.
Yeah, I know. I think I think that I would say exactly the same. Can we look at what we need in terms of immigration? Britain is a nation that's built, you know, for the last 400 years. Whenever work was needed, Britain has gone to other countries to bring the workers. They've taken them all over the world, you know. Yeah. That's been the practice of Britain, because there's always a need for more workers, and there is a need now. You talk to farmers in this country, people in, you know, needing employment in social care. I mean, there are jobs, there are vacancies, but the people in Britain just don't want to do those jobs. So my wife's family come from a farm in North Yorkshire, and they employ mostly overseas people on their farm. And I said to them, why do you do that? Why don't you employ local people? All right, me asking them to say, why don't you use local people? And they said, we have a very simple test for employment. We say to people, be at the farm at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we'll talk with you. Firstly, hardly anybody turns up from the local groups at 4 o'clock. But secondly, when they get there, they give them one task. And they say to them, there's the pigsty. I want you to clean that, wash it so that I can see my face in it. The locals say, I'm not going to do that. Whereas those who have come from other countries utterly do what is required. They get employed. No, and that's in Rishi Sunak's, backyard, yes, in Northallerton, where I'm speaking about. I'd start to talk with Rishi Sunak about that. That's how I would start.
Yeah, thank you.
Simon, while people are still thinking, shall I ask a question while you can formulate your questions? Yeah, I'll come to you then. Okay. I think I found your phrase very impactful, 90% when people are moving because of war and conflict. So you said, stop wars, not votes. The question arises, multi-billions pounds of business of making and selling weapons by the powerful world to be used in mostly in the third world, or we don't call it third world anymore, but a kind of poorer countries who really buy them. And who's going to stop unless this huge business is stopped? And whole economic impact, if you stop this business, what happens? I think that's the really very, very basic question at a deeper level. I have no answer, but I'm not sure whether you will have one. But that's something we need to raise.
We do need to raise that, and you write to your MPs about that, you know, constantly, and to the Prime Minister. And, you know, I was visiting a country, I won't say where now, it doesn't matter, but utterly destroyed by war and weapons, and they were just emerging from it. And I asked the people who were sitting with me there, I said, you know, what's the role of the church in this kind of situation? What should we be doing? What's my role? And they said, you're a preacher, preach peace. You know, leaders, church leaders should really teach congregations about these issues and equip members to engage in informed ways with these issues so that they can address their political leaders about that. So I think, I mean, all right, I'm not being simplistic, but that's a very important task for people like me and you to preach peace. You do not underestimate the value of speaking up for peace and raising these issues.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for your words and thank you for your work with City of Sanctuary. I work at Gatwick Detainee Welfare Group in the detention centres at Gatwick Airport. And I was wondering what changes you've seen in detention and Cities of Sanctuary since your Unlocking the Doors report that you mentioned in your speech.
Yeah. Well, my plea, particularly, so this is 24 years ago, was to ask the Home Secretary the Prime Minister, to not detain people who haven't committed a crime alongside conventional prisoners. So I visited the detention centres, I saw for myself. This was happening in Rochester, for example, you know, Maghaberry prison in Northern Ireland. In Maghaberry, I saw, this is post-Good Friday Agreement, so they were taking prisoners out, and the cells where multiple murderers had been held, you know, with doors that were 6 inches thick. I saw this frail man who just had lost his immigration papers and therefore had ended up being detained as an overstayer, and he was held in there and kept in that cell for 19 hours a day, like any other prisoner. Why? You know, what danger is he? You know, he's not even committed a crime, really. So that's what I was saying. Just one thing that was unjust, you know, take a simple thing which you think you can change. So I was just saying, don't imprison people who haven't committed a crime in conventional prison. Anyway, that was stopped. However, you know, they built bigger detention centres, you know, or reception centres or whatever they're called, but they are prisons. They are still in prison. The conditions are very much like prison. So I think, well, you know from your work, am I speaking from your, you know, experience? I'm not saying something that's not incorrect, because I have been there and seen for myself. In one detention centre, I think at Heathrow, it really looked like dog kennels to me when I arrived there. There was a gentleman, as soon as I went in, who came up to me with his hand like this and said, "Where's your camera? Where's your camera?" I thought he was having a go at me for coming there and saying, "You come here and take pictures," you know, people like. What he was actually saying was, "Why haven't you brought your camera? Look at my wrists. Look at the bruises on my... I've been handcuffed here and I've been dragged around in my handcuffs to try and get me onto a plane. You know, why don't you take pictures? You have pictures of us coming in, but nobody takes pictures of us being, you know, removed from here." So that continues. So I think we need to continue to press. I honestly believe people should not be detained. You know, it's not essential. We should find another way of engaging with people who are looking for safety. who are not a danger, but who are treated as a danger and portrayed as a danger. And that's, again, part of our learning and education to help to build different narrative. So I've learnt any time I'm interviewed by radio or TV that when the question is always in a negative way, like your question at the front, numbers and threats and terrorists and so on. I never go with that. I always tell positive stories. I always tell stories of, remarkable skills people bring, the contributions they make. So you have to give them the other narrative than the one that's constantly before us, which forms people's opinion. So, we can do that. It hadn't changed a lot, sadly.
I'm conscious of the time. We've got time for a couple more questions, brief questions.
Thank you very much. Crystal from Women Against Rape, one of the recipients of the London Churches Fund.
Great.
I just want, following on from the question the brother asked about the weapons and the weapons of mass destruction. Yes. I wondered, what the church's role was in being able to be part of the boycott and divestment sanctions movement. Yeah. I know it's been started, but it seems to me it's absolutely critical at a time where we have a genocide in Palestine and where the arms are pouring in there. And I wondered whether also your idea of sanctuary, of the church building itself, would go back to how it was when Viraj Mendes took sanctuary in Manchester, and whether we're going to be coming to a time like that, which it seems to me we are going to be. Yeah. And whether you could say something about that. Thank you.
Well, it could come to that. I think my kind of passion at the moment is in the shelter of each other. It's the community that is needed around people to protect people. Buildings can provide sanctuary, but I think more important than that is the community around you. So in Glasgow, for example, you will be familiar, whenever anybody was threatened with deportation, always come early in the morning. They had a network where they could phone, WhatsApp, social media. Police are turning up at 4 o'clock at such and such a house, be there, and they just come and protect a ring to stop them taking, and that works always, because it's not about avoiding the law or evading the law, but making the law publicly accountable is what I want to say. So they like to do their kind of messy work in the darkness of the night, but they don't like it when it's exposed and people see it, because then they just go away, the police. They don't, and that's how people have been protected. The real sanctuary has just been provided by people forming a ring of community, and that's been quite effective. I think there is a place for sanctuary in buildings, but that other way of being sanctuary as people together, a community which is a sanctuary, is what I think now understand by a church of sanctuary. We could talk about that a bit more, but I'm happy to do that. Okay.
Thank you. Time for one more question.
I'm very proud that my old university has divested from the arms trade. And I'm very proud that York University is now a city of sanctuary. And that could be something to do with your work in Yorkshire.
Yes, I hope so, yeah.
And we're now in this borough here where this church is, Camden, and there's a movement to ask our council to tell us what they have invested in the arms trade and and to ask them to divest from it. Yeah. And the horrors of Gaza have made this far more urgent to all of us. And if anyone would like to sign, I have a petition here if anyone's from Camden. But could I add that I came here with a young man who came to Britain in a canoe with one other person. He went across the desert in Africa. He was kidnapped. He was a survivor of modern slavery. He has all kinds of physical and mental damage and couldn't stay here. And I was actually glad he'd gone home, because when you took out your bag and you showed what had been on the boat, I thought he couldn't have coped with it. But we're lucky here. We can cope with it, and we need to look at what the realities are, and I really want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And there's if I could just commend a book to you. It's a book called Dorro, D, the letter D as in Delta, D-O-R-R-O. It's somebody's name. It was somebody who was rescued on a boat in the Mediterranean. And do you remember when the Greek authorities wouldn't let the boats dock, and some people have been in court recently? It was to do with that boat. Anyway, they were in the sea for several days waiting to be rescued. And in that time, one of the people who was on the rescue boat got to know Dorro and talked with him and just wrote everything that Dorro said. And that book is that story. It's an amazing read. If you can get hold of it, have a look. It's called Dorro, Hero Survivor.
Thank you very much, Inderjit, for your time, your insight, your wisdom, and travelling down from Sheffield to be with us this evening. I know that Inderjit's going to be travelling back later, but there will be an opportunity afterwards when we're having our refreshments for people to come up and talk with you. But thank you very much for your time. Yeah. Thank you.